Bold and raw perspectives of local politics. Important information which impacts our community, nation, and world. Exposing truth, transparency, and getting to the heart of relevant issues that you just won't see in the clickbait media. And always keeping it real. It's the Michelle Tanner Podcast.
But I won't back down.
Welcome to the Michelle Tanner Podcast. I've missed y'all. Have you guys missed me? It's been a few weeks. I'm going to blame my buddy over here, who is really the mastermind behind the operation of this podcast. But
my fault.
he has unfortunately been quite sick. So actually, I'm very grateful that he's feeling better. Grateful that we are back in business here. So I have missed you guys, though, and I'm really, really excited to talk to you guys today about really what I see as the most pressing issue in America right now, because let's face it, if we don't have secure elections, if we can't trust that our vote counts, that we actually have a constitutional republic, what do we really have? So this is a vital issue, and it is not a partisan issue, by the way. Those people who are trying to say this is just some crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist, they need to go back and watch really even the mainstream media from like 2016 to 2018 and see all of the left wing screaming about the need for election integrity. So this is across the board. A lot of polls show even up to 80% of Americans have concerns that their vote does not count. So even if our election system was perfect, if you have 80% of Americans who feel like it's not, we still have a problem. And those of us who are elected officials, we have an obligation to do whatever we can within our legal authority to help restore this transparency. So my guest today, who I'm really excited for you guys all to get to learn from as well, her name is Wendy Godlewski. Wendy is a statistician. She also is part of an organization called Utahns for Transparency, which is an awesome organization with education regarding election integrity, and I'll let her delve into that here in a minute. But where I really got to know Wendy even more recently, I want to tell you a little bit about is my experience this year being on the board of canvassers. So Utah has a law here, which, by the way, I actually don't agree with this law and think that it needs to be changed. But as of right now, state law is that the city council members and mayor are the board of canvassers for our own election, which means 3 of those council members' names were actually on the ballot, and they are in charge of then certifying their own election. And then the other 2, we obviously have a very biased interest. You know, I endorsed certain candidates. And so to me, it's just not there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. But regardless, that is the way currently, until we can get that changed, state law is. So, and this is how much I'll tell you that they even focus on this board of canvassers position at the city level. I didn't even know I was a member of the board of canvassers until Wendy and her group reached out and said, hey, did you know you are a member of the board of canvassers? And this is what state code said. And I was like, wow, okay, this is really good to know, because I deeply care about the transparency of our elections and want to, if I'm going to be certifying an election, right, like I have to know and feel totally confident that this election was accurate and secure. And so I began the process of talking with the county and finding out, you know, what I could do. There's a lot of concerns about the machines and wanted to verify if the machines are accurate. And so I was actually able to, with some opposition, although not necessarily from the county. I want to give a shout out to Ryan Sullivan. He is our new county clerk auditor, and he has actually been really great to work with. And I was able to spend essentially a full day down there looking at the ballots, doing hand tabulations, comparison to the machines, and really in the end had 100% accuracy with that. Now, I did find one thing that was actually interesting and showed how hand counts can actually be beneficial. But before we get more into that, I would love for you guys to get to know Wendy. So Wendy, tell us a little bit about your background and what got you involved in this election integrity mission.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me. So I attended BYU on full academic scholarship. My degree is in statistics. And I just
love
always
your shirt,
thought,
by the way.
Yes,
I use math in real life.
I wore my math shirt today. I attended my first post-election audit last year. And I'm the only member of the public in our entire county who attended all 3 post-election audits last year. I ran into your dad at the first one. And both of us it was our first time, both of us. We were horrified. There was no counting. It was not an audit by any stretch of the imagination. They weren't counting anything. So if you're going to check to make sure the machine count is accurate, shouldn't you be counting? All they were doing was looking at images. Does this ballot match this image, this photo that the machine took?
Right.
So they were checking to make sure 1% of them were recorded correctly, but they were doing nothing to make sure they were counted correctly. And I was just in horror. And, I complained about it then, and finally the state agreed.
Yay!
The state, December of last year, they published this audit. They buried it, though, on page 51. It's just horrific to read, but it says, our post-election audit lacks the ability to validate election results.
Wow. So our very own audit system that's in place. And I understand there have been some changes at this recent legislative session that are maybe moving in the right direction.
Not yet.
But it hasn't taken effect yet.
Yes.
Some of them have passed, right? But just not gone into effect. Am I understanding that correctly?
So they passed a bill in March that said that the state group, the OLAG, can do audits, but they specified no standards. It doesn't even apply to all the elections, and they didn't do anything in our September. The state didn't change anything for our September audit. I don't anticipate them changing anything for our November audit. It's just as useless as it's ever been. It's just did it record right, but it doesn't check to see whether it was counted correctly. So,
and that's the big thing.
Yes.
And when you're talking about viewing the image on the machine versus the actual ballot, so that was actually the one thing that I found in my review of the ballots in the second precinct that I evaluated. I couldn't figure out why I had initially had 3 extra votes for someone. Well, come to find out, there was a ballot that was kicked out by the machine because it was counted as an overvote because there was a smudge mark on it.
Right.
Which when they then adjudicated it, they looked at the image of the ballot on the actual machine versus the actual ballot. And on the machine, that smudge mark actually looked dark, like it was an intentional vote for someone that if you looked at the physical ballot like I was, it was very obvious what the intent of the voter was, which is why I counted, the 3 votes on there. And so, and to Ryan Sullivan's credit, he was great. As soon as we found that, he went through all of the adjudicated ballots, made sure there weren't any other discrepancies, which to my knowledge, there was not. But it just shows how, we all should be concerned and invested with wanting to do everything we can within our ability to work together on this.
Totally.
I don't think any of us are out to get anyone. We all just, I think at the end of the day, want the same thing: safe, secure elections.
Secure elections, restored trust. We're not accusing anybody of anything. We're just saying we're vulnerable. We're looking at other counties, other states that have issues, and we're saying, whoa, well, our audits aren't checking any of this. So we need to take preventative measures. We're vulnerable in several areas in our county, and we need to put preventative measures in place to correct for that. And you were a rock star.
Thanks
Michelle,
to you letting me know that I was on the board of canvassers.
None of them knew. And we had a lot of city council people show up. All in all, we ended up, the citizens ended up watching them and checking. Citizens were there too, doing the counts. We had, not only, it was landmark. This was a landmark election for the whole state, thanks to you and the others who showed up from their Board of Canvassers. This is the first time in over 15 years in Utah that anyone has done anything to check on the machine count accuracy. And you guys managed to hand count 7 precincts out of 130, so that's almost 5%. And the other landmark thing that it did was it disproved all the myths you hear about hand counting. I mean, you have to wonder, why does most of Europe hand count their elections? Cybersecurity experts for years have been saying machines are not securable for elections.
Yeah.
And so all these other first world nations, Canada, Israel, I could go on and on, have switched back to hand-counted elections. Why hasn't America? Because we are believing the lie that hand counts take too long and that they cost too much and that they are not accurate. And you disproved that. You and everyone else. We had, as I did the statistics, and by the way, all this data is available on our website, southernutahnsfortransparency.com. Click election integrity, and you can find all this data. But you guys did 7 full precincts, hand counted with 100% accuracy in an average of only 1 hour and 11 minutes per precinct. And not only was it 100% accuracy, but you found an error that the machine made by virtue of its photo, showing the photo the machine took had that darker thing that you described. Which caused one person to lose their vote until you caught it.
And that's a big deal. I mean, someone might say, oh, that was just one ballot, 3 votes, who cares? But if that's my ballot, I want my vote to count. Every single American citizen's legal vote should count.
Yes. And not only that, but if you translate those results to the whole election, If we had just had 4 election judge volunteers per precinct, because that's the way we used to do it in Utah and the rest of the nation, rest of America for over 200 years, I've hosted caucuses. We've always used to ask for volunteers for election judges. With just 4 of those volunteers per precinct, our county's entire September 2023 primary could have been hand counted in about an hour.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
You mean we wouldn't have had to wait like almost 2 weeks for results?
Well, you still have to wait
for
the curing and the mail-in from the military and other things. But yes, so we're just begging people to get the word out that hand counts are securable, verified. Unlike machine counts, they're secure, they can be verified, they build public trust, they're accurate. You get same-day results, and you save money. I've even run the costs too. It's definitely a huge saving, and so we're urging people to call their elected officials, everything from state legislators to county clerk to county commissioners. Urge them to return to hand counts like the RNC recommended. August 25th.
I thought this was huge.
Do you want to announce it?
RNC. Well, I want you to read whatever portion you wanted to, but for me, this was so interesting that the RNC, so the Republican National Committee, came out with this because even in our state elections with the Republican Party, the special election that we just had, it's electronic. And I'm thinking, shouldn't we be setting the example if we clearly have an issue with trusting the machines, yet our own party is going to use the machines? So I loved that they came out with this resolution, and I'll let you talk about that.
So August 25th, and by the way, southernutahnsfortransparency.com is nonpartisan because we believe the right and the left and the independents and unaffiliateds all want secure elections.
Absolutely.
And data shows, polling, Rasmussen polls, you can see that on our website too, 50% of Democrats in the 2022 election believed that officials were ignoring evidence of widespread fraud. 50% of Democrats, 79% of Republicans. And so this is a bipartisan issue, right? So having said that, I'm just going to say that the RNC is a Republican organization, but they did unanimously pass this August 25th, and it says, whereas the grassroots activists of the Republican Party have discovered and made it abundantly clear that there are recognized problems with electronic election procedures, and on and on and on, resolved, the RNC supports the rights of counties and states that are willing and able to competently and efficiently implement voting procedures that do not require the use of machines, and those that implement hand counting procedures that are fully auditable. Yes. And lots of other great paragraphs too. You can find the whole thing on our website, southernutahnsfortransparency.com. But that
That's
it's
so
time
awesome.
for at least the Republican Party to start making these changes. And in this county, our clerk and our commissioners and all our state legislators are Republicans. And so we are urging them to follow this recommendation to return to hand count elections. And we've just shown how accurate it is, how quickly it can be done, and how inexpensive it is. And it, I feel like they want to just stick with like strengthened audits. But the thing is, even if as a statistician, I can tell you, you could set a confidence limit. You could say, I want to be 99% confident with a plus or minus 2% margin of error. And it's going to take, I could give you the numbers for doing an audit like that. It's going to be huge, especially where now that they bulk our ballots in precincts, and to get a random selection, you would have to, it would just be, it would take so many hours to do a truly statistically significant randomized sample of all the ballots. And even then, you just end up with a percentage. We're 99% confident, which is 1 out of 100 chance that maybe somebody else won.
Yeah.
Especially in really close races, and our county has seen some races within 10 votes.
Oh yeah, very
and
close.
just this last September, we had lots of our city council races within 1 point, right? The drop off between the 6th place and the 7th place, the 6th place winner and the 7th place loser, was less than 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 votes 2 years ago when I ran. That person who got through in the 4th position past the primary, she won by 4 votes in a municipal race. And so it is. Every single vote has to be accurate. It has to count. And I love the fact that you're bringing up the fact of it being easy to audit, because that's the issue for me is people will say
auditing. What I'm saying is that an audit, if you refuse to do hand counts and think that you can achieve public confidence in elections through auditing, I'm just saying that's really hard, because we only did 7 precincts, and because it wasn't randomized, it doesn't tell us anything about the other 100 precincts.
Right.
It only says those 7 precincts were accurate.
Right.
Statistically, you can't say it, you can't infer your results to the other precincts at all. And in fact, when you're talking about high value elections like U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate, which we've got coming up this November and then next spring, there are bad actors outside our county, outside our state, outside our nation who have a definite interest in manipulating those elections. And the thought left my mind.
Well, but that's been the interesting thing for me, since 2020, because I think so many of us, the 2020 election was the big wake up call of, hello, I'm not a statistician or expert over here, but I know that this vertical spike after they stopped counting votes for 3 hours, which never happens, my antennas are going off all over the place. Like, something's not right here. And then, of course, the more you research it, way prior to 2020, I think I listened to a presentation that was back from 2013 of a cybersecurity expert talking about how they actually have hacked election systems and the electronic machines.
Clint Curtis testified before Congress in 2000.
Yeah.
Yes.
This has been well known and documented for a long time. And then you couple that also with mail-in ballots. Now, who thought it was a good idea to trust our vote to the U.S. Postal Service?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what and open up the gate for fraud.
In Washington County, I'm not saying we have fraud in Washington County. All I've ever said is that we are vulnerable.
Right.
And we are vulnerable through 2 huge avenues: software errors and digital manipulation through the machine counts, and second, ballot stuffing because of things like vote by mail. And we get our ballots printed from K&H printers in Seattle. They truck them to the post office in Salt Lake City before they're mailed out to us. So back to the question I forgot earlier, those bad actors at the state, nation level, they know how to get around, the kind of audit that you and I worked on last week is awesome, but it doesn't prevent, they know how to defeat, a 3% audit that's just precinct, that's not randomized.
Right.
And even in the counties that have done a randomized one, they find an error, they just say, actually Michelle Longspear should have won, even though she came in last place. This was a Democrat county commission race in DeKalb County, Georgia. Actually, she should have won, but it was just a one-time fluke of the machine. They just whatever you find, they just say, oh, well, such and such. Anyway, you can find on our website a list of very few counties have done hand count audits, a full hand count audit. But of those that have, most of them have found errors, and you've got a list of 70 counties on our website.
Wow.
that have found major errors. We're talking, 20%, 25%.
Wow.
And even flipping races and little races, school board races,
Yeah.
county commissioner races. There's a list of them on the website. And anyway.
Well, one thing with the machines is a lot of times I will hear the opposition say, well, but our machines aren't hooked up to the internet. There's no possible way they could be manipulated. But what's so interesting about, say, Mesa County, Tina Peters and that whole situation there is those machines also, to my understanding, weren't hooked up to the internet, but
They don't
yet
need to be.
there was still manipulation that was shown with that. Do you want to talk maybe a little bit about not obviously our area? We, like you said, it's vulnerable, but we're not saying that there's fraud in our particular area, but there has been identified actual fraud in many other areas, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Colorado. Do you want to talk about maybe some of those other examples as well?
Well, there's a lot on our website. We use 27 of 29 counties in Utah use ES&S. So if you go on our website, SouthernUtahnsforTransparency.com, click election integrity, and you can click on the ES&S. Are there problems with ES&S? And you can find a list of problems they've had in other counties with ES&S. Like Antrim County, Michigan, they found modems in the ES&S machine.
So explain for those of us who aren't as educated as you are, explain ES&S. Like what exactly is ES&S? Is that the software that we're using? Is that like a statewide?
So most people are familiar with Dominion machines.
Right.
Salt Lake County uses Dominion. But the majority machine used across America is ES&S.
Okay, so it's the actual brand
Yes.
of the machine.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And our county uses the DS200s and the DS450s, and they want to buy a new one, and we sure hope they won't. They're expensive. These machines are really expensive, and the maintenance and the time you dump into them.
Where are they manufactured? Do you know where they're actually made at? Are they made in America?
I can tell you that their parts are not made in America,
Okay.
and often their parts aren't assembled in America. In fact, Arizona legislature passed a bill last session, 1037, I think it was, that said you cannot use a machine that doesn't have all its parts made and assembled in America, which eliminates every single voting machine in use right now.
Wow.
Yeah. And the other scary thing is that you cannot find out that the ES&S will not disclose who's on their board. It's so
Wow.
you don't even.
So we are purchasing machines, trusting our elections to machines from a company that we're not even allowed to know who's on the board of this company?
Yeah.
Wow.
And who exposed that was all the mainstream media in 2016 through 2018.
So this was when the Democrats were screaming about election integrity.
You can look on ABC, NBC footage of them doing little specials about how horrible it is that we don't know what countries, are these even Americans that are running these companies.
Interesting.
And they did, all these big mainstream media sources were doing FOIA requests trying to figure it out. And they couldn't find out.
Yeah.
And so they were screaming about it all the way up until October of 2020.
And then all of a sudden,
if you're asking questions, now you're an election denier.
You're a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Or you're a threat to democracy. I think one thing that our Governor Cox and our LG Deidre Henderson has not done Utahns any favors by is coming out and essentially making those of us who are asking legitimate questions, who, can obviously see, what's going on right in front of our eyes, yet they're still treating us like we are, this threat to democracy. And, the lack of transparency only furthers the red flags in people's mind. Whereas if they just came out and acted like they didn't have anything to hide and say, let's look at the cast vote record. They do it in other states. I mean, why do you think it's secretive here in Utah? Because to me, even if they're on the up and up, and I'm not trying to accuse them of not being, but what I am saying is they are not doing Utahns any favors in restoring transparency when they are just treating the vast majority of the population who has concerns like we're crazy.
Yes.
And being more and more secretive about it. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Utahns are just too trusting, and we haven't been paying attention. But it's now up to almost half of our voter rolls are completely hidden from the public. That's unheard of in any other state. Like every expert I bring into Utah says they're just shocked. Normally you only withhold for people who are on the witness protection program or like have a court order for domestic violence. But we've got almost 50% of Utah voters withheld from the public, completely unverifiable. Wow. And we've got a lot of weird things. Like you mentioned, we're one of the few states that has not released cast vote records were created. If you look at the NIST standards, they were created for public review. And we're one of the only states that hasn't released a single cast vote record.
Wow.
And Utah, the court case said that the Board of Canvassers are the only ones who are allowed to look at it. But I understand. And, they gave you a glimpse at it. But
right, yeah. So I was able to look at it. But I wanted to bring in a statistician to look at it, but I was not allowed to. But I mean, looking at it, it didn't really give me any. Not being a trained...
Right. You don't know what to look for.
It wasn't really helpful at all.
And they weren't as welcoming the next day when another Board of Canvasser member asked to see it. And they put a lot of restrictions on you guys. They wouldn't let you bring in even lined paper. You had to spend your first... when Hurricane City Council came in, they had to spend their first 15 minutes creating lined paper to do their tallies on because they weren't even allowed to have any tally sheets, not even lined paper.
That's what I'm saying about the pushback. It's bizarre. Yeah. And I've been, shouting praises to Ryan Sullivan over at the county, and Adam Snow has been very conducive to, helping with this. I think the pushback's coming from the LG. I think it's coming from the top, which again, why? Why are they so secretive, even with the Board of Canvassers?
They actually sent down 2 people from the state LG's office. Not the day you were there, but there was one there the day you were there. I
don't think so. I don't think there was anyone from the LG.
I went to 4.
The city, the city insisted that someone from the city go with me because heaven forbid me. As a concerned citizen or a representative of the city go and evaluate ballots and try to be an educated member of the Board of Canvassers, right? Heaven forbid. We have to, make sure we send someone else with her to make sure she's on her best behavior. In fact, when I got home that day, my husband said, "Now, how was it?" And I said, "Well, when you're in grade school and you're kind of the problem child of the class and you've got a teacher who really doesn't like kids and they're standing over you with the ruler. Like if you make any wrong move, they're just going to smack you." That's how it felt, which is unfortunate.
Well, I think, I don't remember which day it is because it's all a blur to me now because I went to 4 of them. But they ultimately sent down 2 people from Salt Lake.
From the states, from the LG's office.
Yes. And, but I think at the end of it, once it was all said and done, everyone was like, wow. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was a great experience overall. It really was.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went away thinking, hooray, this is a landmark day for Utah. Finally, we have some proof that the machines don't have a software error problem or anything. It was just, we have some evidence that 7 of 130 precincts were on the mark.
Yes.
And it was a landmark day. And I feel like perhaps maybe even the people from the LG's office maybe took some notes. I would hope.
I sure hope so because
people just got to contact their officials. We just got to keep pressing because this is just the start. This is how it should have been all along, and since we just can't dump the time and money into a real audit the way it should be done, we ought to just follow most of Europe's lead and go back to hand-counted elections. I hope none of this conversation we've had makes anybody any less likely to vote.
Right.
Just if you stop voting, it makes fraud even easier.
That's who they target a lot of times.
The less
are
active voters.
The less active voters.
Yes.
Because they know it's a lot more difficult if they know I vote in every election.
Yes.
If they're going to duplicate my vote, well, I'm going to know that when I go in to vote and they don't let me vote, right?
Yes.
So that's a key point. In fact, I was at an event the other day, and that's what, when I hear elected officials say that nobody cares about election integrity, my mind is blown, because I've been to a lot of campaign events recently, and that is the number one issue that residents are concerned about, that they're bringing up. They want to know that their vote counts. In fact, one gentleman at our event just the other night stood up and said, well, I don't even motivate me to vote. I don't even think my vote's going to count. Why would I go out and waste my time and vote?
That's sad.
And to your point, though, that is who they target when it comes to fraud.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's easier to cheat when the margins are less versus if there's a landslide victory. I think it does make it harder to cheat, make it harder to, make up the number of ballots, which maybe I'm thinking of that wrong, but that's just the way my logical mind is thinking, that if you have this landslide. So it does matter, but we still have to do our part. And the only time we actually lose is when we give up. So we cannot give up. So what would you say, Wendy, a lot of it, I think, is going to be going to your website, getting educated. But aside from that, for the average American who witnessed what happened in 2020, they know something wasn't right, and 2022, and even I was going to say, and even before that.
Yeah.
But I think that 2020 is like the big wake up call one for a lot of people, and I think a lot of us, though, lack the know-how of
how to handle
what do we do about it. Like, it feels so big, like it's out of our control, like there's nothing we can actually do, which obviously I don't agree with. But to the average person out there who maybe feels that way, what would be your advice of where do they start, other than educating, which a lot of that education is great on your website? Where would they go from there?
So on southernutahnsfortransparency.com, we have a Take Action tab you can click,
awesome.
and it's got list of ideas that you can do. Number one being our online petition. It covers 4 items, hand counts and ways to deal with ballot stuffing, and also public comment, which is another one of our tenets on our website, and public access. So they can fill out that petition, and they can encourage others to do it. And there's also, we've listed all the email addresses of people they should contact. We encourage them to share that online petition with their neighbors and other people. And there's a list of like 10 things that anybody could do on that website. But I would say, over 100 counties in America have started to transition back to hand-counted elections.
Wow.
And I look at counties that are bigger than ours, like Shasta County, California. How did they start to make that transition? Their county commissioners voted to return to hand counting after their county commission room was packed for months.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to take. We've got to get, and that's one of the things on our website, to show up to our county commission meetings. I would urge they're the first and third Tuesday of every month at 3:30 p.m. Starting October 17th. The one coming up the first Tuesday in October is at 4 p.m. But then they're going to switch it to 3:30 for October 17th. So that's in the new county building, top floor of the county building, the new one downtown. If we want to get what Shasta County got, we've got to pack that room for months. We've just got to. It's just a matter of pressure and education, like letting your officials know how accurate this hand count was. Share this, all this data is on our website, the hand count success data. that where we had 100% accuracy in an average of 1 hour, 11 minutes per precinct.
Wow.
That's all the data is on the website. So start getting the word out. And
Something you are so good about as well when it comes to, you're talking about the importance of showing up to the meetings, educating. You are so good at presenting things in such a logical, respectful way. I think where some kind of lose the momentum that we can gain on our side is if they are just yelling at their representatives, or not to say that we can't get passionate, because we care. This is a very passionate issue, but not crossing the line into making threats or just name calling, because it's human nature. Once that happens, we all go on the defense, and our listening ears are no longer on, and we need the listening ears to be on. We need to be collaborating and coming together for what I think really is the common goal, minus the few bad actors that might be out there, which I like to think are not here in our local county. I want to think that we all have that same common goal and interest here. So I appreciate that about you, that you are,
thank you.
You present it in such an awesome way. And you also, to me, are proof that one person can make such a huge impact. That's something I always stress to my children, what I try to stress really anytime I have the opportunity to talk to anyone is, we are all born at this time in history for such a divine purpose. And the opposition would want nothing more for us just to get overwhelmed and give up and feel like, oh, I'm just one person, I can't do anything. But absolutely we can. And we all have our different areas that we're passionate about for a reason. Like, there's a reason that you are passionate about election integrity. We can't all be everywhere at once. And that's what I really, really appreciate about what you've done, is it's also an area I'm passionate about, but I'm also so focused on, X, Y, and Z over here.
Yes.
And so we need people like you who will get us organized, who will put the resources out there in one place. I love your website. I love that you have it all laid out there, even to the extent of how to take action. So there's no excuses for the rest of us out there. You've paved the way. And we absolutely can make a difference.
And I would say to everyone, whatever your issue is, there's lots of issues to be fighting for. Taxes, however you feel about this issue or that issue, I could list dozens. And candidates, a lot of people spend a lot of time pushing candidates, but I would beg all of you, I'm talking to the audience now, whatever amount of time in a week that you have to spend on fixing our country, I beg you to spend at least 90% of that time fighting for secure elections, because none of those issues have a chance, and none of the candidates you're pushing have a chance until our elections are fair and secure. And I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah.
And I don't have the time to fight all the battles I'd like to be fighting. I'm focused on hand counting, but I need somebody to focus on getting us back to primarily in-person voting. I mean, you look at the turnout. They claim vote by mail increases turnout. We had 19%. The nonpartisan ballots had 19% turnout last week.
Wow.
19%. Vote by mail, I can show you plenty more stats in our county. Vote by mail does not increase turnout. And
do we really care about convenience more than we care about accuracy?
Right.
No, we shouldn't anyway.
So we need absentee ballots for the military and a few other hardship cases, but I need other people to be focused on talking to legislators about getting us back to in-person voting, even if it's just a bill that gets it at the county level. Let the counties decide.
Right.
Because I'm focusing all my efforts on the machine vulnerabilities, but somebody else needs to be focused on the ballot stuffing vulnerabilities, which were created by vote by mail, and I don't have the time.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's only so much time in a day, which is why this has to be a collaborative effort. So state legislators, if you're watching this right now, and we actually have a ton of amazing, especially our Southern Utah delegation. I would love to collaborate with any state legislator who is willing to take this on. And there, like we mentioned earlier, there have been some steps in the right direction, I think, in this last legislative session, but there's still so much work to be done. And thanks to people like you, I know we are going to keep moving in that direction, but we all need to definitely come together. And I will tell you, me being on the side now as an elected representative, it does make a difference when I am hearing from residents what their concerns are. It does matter. Your voice absolutely matters. So phone calls, emails, let your representatives know this is important to you. So we are almost out of time, down to about 30 seconds. Wendy, any closing thoughts for us? You've been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I would just urge people to write down this number because we need hand count volunteers and we need people to be aware. You know, if an alert comes up, I need to be able to notify people. So if you would text the word integrity to this phone number and you can get on our alert list, 209-657-3601. That's 209-657-3601. Text integrity to that number, and then you can get on our alert list.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank
Thanks,
y'all for
Michelle.
watching.
Of the Michelle Tanner Podcast. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share. And always remember to keep exposing truth.
But I won't back down. No, I won't back down.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.